Hello and welcome to the Armchair QBs. We're slightly later than normal, but good things come to those that wait, don't they, Dan?
I hope so. Well, we'll see, but I think it's going to be a slightly more condensed version of what we would normally do, given that you've had your anniversary, and
Yes.
I've been working regardless of what anyone else would say about my job. So we will try and be, I think we're going to pick a couple of games, just talk about them, and then get onto our picks later.
Yeah, so what we'll do is we won't be doing a 2 episode this week. It'll all be condensed into one, so you get double the fun in a smaller size. I don't know. Let's not try and bungle any more metaphors. Right, let's kick things off. I'll run through the first result. Detroit beat Chicago 34-30. We kind of called that anyway. We knew this was going to be a bounce back game. New Orleans handled Atlanta 21-16, although Atlanta did have a chance to kind of come back at the end, but they decided to kill my hopes and dreams and my bets and not fulfill on that. Cleveland at Tennessee. Dan, Cleveland win 41-35. This game looks a lot closer than it actually was, but there was some really good stuff from Cleveland in the first half.
Yeah, and I think it really goes to show that as much as we had doubts about Stefanski, when he gets a game plan right, he really, really, really gets it right. I have to say I was really, really impressed with the Browns, and spoke to you as it was happening, saying that this kind of explosion from Cleveland was all schemed. It wasn't just kind of like, really one-on-ones. It was about the Browns, plays just being better against the Tennessee defense, and specifically at targeting certain points, and the way that the Titans attack certain formations and coverages, where the attack certain formations, and the way that they cover certain formations with their defense. And it was done by halftime. We went into it thinking it was all going to be about a fucking slobber knocker between both running games, but Cleveland came out passing the ball. They clearly said, if we try and stay with Tennessee through 4 quarters, we've seen it happen to too many other teams, and we're just going to get absolutely, we don't want to still be within a one score game with Tennessee going into the fourth quarter, because they will just pull away. And so they got it done in the first half, and they got it done through Baker Mayfield's arm. And so all credit to them. But what I just said about, staying with Tennessee and through 4 quarters, that's what the second half was about. 28 points from the Tennessee Titans closed the gap significantly, but again, time wasn't on their side. They just didn't show up in the first half, and the gap was too great.
The only thing you could maybe argue is that there wasn't a ruthlessness from Cleveland in the second half, which for me, I think this was an exceptional result for Cleveland for all the things that you've just said. But if we're picturing Cleveland going into the playoffs, in that type of game, we've seen what happens in playoffs when these results can swing in the second half, especially against the better teams with better offenses. I just think you need to be I would be worried if I'm Cleveland about the second half performance from the offense.
Two things. This could really be considered Cleveland's only real value win, I would say, potentially. Given their other results, and that the weather played a large part in 2 of their home games, where they got victories. But the other thing is that that's just the nature of NFL coaches, unfortunately. Apart from perhaps Kansas City last year, I think if you look back at a lot of the good teams and kind of good offenses, you would say that a lot of them aren't busting teams for 28 points each half. And just the conservative nature of NFL coaches will always be that if you're up by 3-4 scores, you want to keep the ball, run the ball, make the clock the other team's enemy. And that just never really leads itself to, the similar kind of explosion of points that got you to that point in the first place. So it certainly shows that they got a bit too conservative, and they allowed Tennessee to kind of come back into it. But I still think that the initial game plan from Cleveland was, exceptional, really well executed, and Tennessee have got real questions about the defense.
Yeah, I don't think they've gone away all season though, those questions. And we've known that the pass rush has been an issue, and I think the way they just got carved up on the run is another massive question mark here, isn't it?
Well, I mean, Clowney's now out for the year, so it's one of the worst free agent signings ever. I don't think he'll ever be back. But I seriously doubt he'll be back with the Titans next year. But no, as I'm saying, this wasn't about the run game, and I think that when everyone was wanting to zig, Stefanski found a way to zag, and because there wasn't that pass rush, because Mayfield wasn't always being harassed from the very from the first quarter on, and they were able to scheme up specific throws to allow him to I mean, to me, it's not as though Mayfield was having to go to the second, third, and fourth reads all the time, and he was a Peyton Manning-esque performance of Mayfield. It was all because of what had been set up for him by the coaching staff. So I would say it was more on his arm in the first half rather than any sort of real running game. The running game did its job in the second half, but that's why we expected what we expected from this game, and it, as always, just kind of completely changed. And they managed to keep Derrick Henry to 60 yards. So well played to the Cleveland defense, because I don't think he's been kept to 60 yards for about the last 5 games.
No, it was an impressive performance. I think also having Myles Garrett back helped Cleveland in this game. But then again, adding somebody who of that caliber back will always help out a defense. So I guess my concern for this Cleveland team is, how far could we see them going in the playoffs? Because this is the best version of Cleveland. Do we think that we can see this again? Or is this like a one-off?
Let's say that they all put it together one day and they had the running game and they had the schemed up throws that we've seen last week. Yeah, I mean, again, in the first couple of quarters, if you get out to a really, really big lead, they are the type of team that could suffocate and frustrate a comeback opportunity. But I mean, their losses are to the Ravens, Steelers, and the Raiders. And so they're 3 potential playoff teams, and they haven't fared well against any of those teams. They've only scored 6 points against the Ravens, 7 points against the Steelers, and 6 points against the Raiders. So, and I appreciate the Raiders game was in poor weather, but I mean, we've got Bengals wins, we've got wins over Washington, wins over the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Jaguars. I mean, that's what I'm saying. This could be potentially argued as their first value win of the season. So, as much as they've got a record of 9-3, their schedule's been favourable. I think they'll get into the playoffs, but I wouldn't really be putting too much stock in saying that they would be guaranteed to have a long run in the playoffs with the other teams that are in the mix.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair comment, and it's just let's see how the rest of the season plays out. It's always difficult with it. I would say next week's game is actually more important because you want to see how they respond to that high of such a good win. Like, are they going to come in flat for this next game? Which, if they're a good team and a serious contender, then they won't. But let's see. Anything else you want to touch on in this game?
No, but I think potentially after next week, if they continue their winning ways and get a victory over the Ravens, which would be potentially a kind of middle of the road win given how the Ravens are just now, and the Steelers were to lose against a good Bills team, it would start getting very interesting to say that they wouldn't just take a wild card place, they had the potential to take the division. And they finish up with the Steelers on the last game of the season. So there might be kind of some head-to-head implications there, but we could get to the point where the Browns could theoretically still top the division. So they've got a big incentive to keep their foot on the gas and not just try and limp into the playoffs and maybe rest players in the run up to the playoffs.
Jacksonville, Minnesota. Jacksonville continued to be feisty this year, eventually going down 24-27 in overtime. Really, really well played game by Jacksonville. They kind of hung around there. Bengals and Dolphins. Bengals lose this one 7-19, and Tua, he played it okay, 296 yards, but it was nothing spectacular.
100 of those yards came on a touch pass, which was about 50 yards, and then he was bailed out of 2 questionable throws into very, very tight coverage by Mike Gesicki and Devontae Parker. So there was 3 throws that got him about kind of 80, 90 yards into that total, and I'm still quite happy with my take on Tua.
Okay. Las Vegas, the New York Jets. Las Vegas won this one 31-28. Last week we spoke about some awful, awful coaching from Anthony Wynn. This week, Greg Williams. Jesus Christ.
No, I heard an argument from the PFF gentleman. It could be argued that it wasn't the wrong call. Now, for anyone that didn't see it or didn't understand, the Jets were on the cusp of a victory, which would have made me very, very happy. But they threw it away with about 5 seconds left to a 46-yard bomb from Derek Carr to Henry Ruggs. And the problem being is that they sent an all-out blitz on cover 0, which meant there was no deep help, and that's why you draft Henry Ruggs to get behind a kind of low-level cornerback, Lamar Jackson, and Vegas escaped with the win, and everybody is berating Greg Williams for this all-out blitz cover 0. Derek Carr was like 1 of 8 against middle pressure throughout the whole game. So, and it's 3rd down. If I really want to play devil's advocate, is it something I would have done? I don't know. But if I wanted to try and justify it and I had to defend it in a forum, let's say, I would think there would be enough statistical elements to say that it wasn't a terrible call, but obviously the result was, and you were opening yourself up to such a result by it. But I can't vilify him too much. And I'm not a Greg Williams defender. He's a prick, and he's had good defenses at certain points, and well, maybe not since 2009, but it's just this one play call.
I can't get on board with the call. I understand sending pressure on it, but going that route just made no sense to me. Why would you leave that corner with no safety help? Right, and also, there's a part of me that's like, okay, Greg Williams made that call. Adam Gase didn't intervene because, there was footage of him chatting on the sideline and then to someone else, and then he panicked when he heard the cover 0 coming across. But the players on the field could easily have checked out of that as well. There was nothing to stop any of those players checking out of that.
And I think you would say in the kind of dysfunctional organisation of the Jets that would be kind of accepted by anyone reviewing this farce. The players didn't believe in Greg Williams' play call. Fair enough. Nobody would have anything bad to say about the Raiders, about the players changing the call on the field.
But even as a defensive coordinator, it's not necessarily okay, we've not played at a high level or anything, but when a call comes in from the sideline, you can change it based on formation or what you see.
Yeah, you'll have certainly if they come out in kind of a tight twins, you'll maybe check off into a half field coverage of predetermined sorts. But look, we don't know what the dynamics are, not only of a professional football team, but of just those players, the defensive captain who's taking the call, and Greg Williams and what they're doing. We don't know what the dynamic is. We just know that the Jets are an utter mess, and there's no point really trying to salvage or find good points because they just find a way to be horrific. But I mean, I think scored. Was this the first time they've scored 28 points in the season?
No.
Tied with the Broncos.
Yeah, they did it with the Broncos. They've also scored 28 against the Chargers and 27 against the Patriots.
But for a team that just does not score more than 28 points or hasn't all season, to be on 28 points and relax to that point and think maybe call a cover 0 because you've got an extra down or whatever. But the cover 0 call on 3rd down can make sense if you want to try and make it worse for them on 4th down, or you think that you can get something from that. But for the Jets in that situation, haven't won all season, you're taking a potential playoff wildcard team to the very edge. It just doesn't make sense. And I mean, why Gase didn't do something is a very, very valid question. But then to fire Williams the day after for that is just...
Yeah, it's a PR move by Gase. It's
I
like,
well,
this can't all be on me.
it's not a PR. It's not a PR move. I mean, they
I,
both know. They both know that they were dead after the season.
oh
They've
no, they
not.
both know that they're dead. But like, what this now means is that Gase can construct a narrative for his next job of, well, I was also hindered by Greg Williams. You saw how much of a wild card he was, and I was dealing with this all season, and that was the final straw for me.
Well, good for you, Mr. Case. But let's look at the last kind of set of drives that you had, shall we? So the Raiders fumble, and you go and you score a touchdown, and so you're up 28-24. The Raiders thereafter take 14 plays and 3 minutes and 57 seconds off the clock and get a turnover on downs. They did score a touchdown, but you just barely managed to get out of that by a terrible offsetting penalty. Okay, you've managed to avoid disaster there on that drive, and then you've got the opportunity to your offense take the ball, control it, don't give Raiders the opportunity to have the ball back, and you go 3 straight runs, 3 plays, 5 yards, and you only take a minute, 2 seconds off the clock, and then you still punt from your 14-yard line, and you give the ball back to them, and they still got relatively good field position. 4 plays later, you've lost the game. So is it all on Greg Williams? I would say 80% of it's on Greg Williams. But, if you've got the ball and the chance to see it out, still on Gase.
I'm not absolving him completely. That's why I said, you should be paying attention as a head coach. You should know what your defensive coordinator is about to call, or at least be standing beside him going, what are your thoughts here? And then when he says cover 0, probably go to blitz every fucker and spy Darren Waller, you slap him and you say, no, I think we'll play cover 4. It was very Jets. It was very Jets.
Yeah. I haven't noticed if the Jets had a timeout or not. I certainly only have the last timeout being when the Raiders were on that 16-play drive. I only have them as taking their second timeout then, so I'm pretty sure that they still would have had a timeout left.
So it makes it even worse. Because surely as soon as you hear cover 0 coming across your headset, like Gase said, you would have run over and taken a timeout. Timeout number 3. Yeah, no, they still had a timeout. I'm just looking at the final drive. I'm looking at the drive report.
Just inexcusable.
Yeah, there's pretty much no excuse for what happened there.
So I seem to have gone on a very, very kind of large journey there. Could I justify it if I was having to defend a criminal? Yes, I would, but I'm not willing to justify it.
Would your conscience be clear defending him? No.
Hey, my conscience is clear every day.
Okay. Colts at Texans. Colts win 26-20. Yeah, everything's falling apart for Houston. Really good article in SI just now about the rise of Jack Easterby. That's come out. Give that a read. Compares him to Littlefinger. So yeah, everything's on fire. Los Angeles Rams beat the Cardinals.
I'll tell you what, just before you go into that, just a small note that obviously with that win, the Colts are now level again with the Titans, so they're back with a shot to win the division.
Yes, they are, and they are now on how many wins for the year?
8-4.
8-4, right? So one more win, and my bet is screwed because I've got them under 8.5. So come on, league. So Los Angeles Rams 38-28 over the Cardinals. Cardinals are in a bit of a skid. We touched on this last time. They're basically the Hail Mary away from being in complete free fall. But they need to pull the nose up because they're going from playoff contention to out of the playoffs pretty quickly. New York Giants, my beloved New York Giants, at the Seattle Seahawks. Giants win 17-12. We said this was the type of game that the Seahawks needed to win to show that they were real, to show that they were contenders. And the Giants just came in and gave them their dinner.
Steady.
Well, no, they dragged them down. That Giants defense against the Seattle offense was really good.
No, look, what I'm going to say is much like what you say, is that they dragged them down to their level.
Yeah.
They did a good job of holding the ball and then a good job of suffocating Seattle. I mean, that's That's just unquestionable. I mean, they ran 15 less plays, around about 30 less yards, same amount of drives, and the Wayne Gallman. I'll give it to it for this week. He actually showed up, 135 yards and 16 carries. So they played that kind of old school football that we talked about that they were maybe built for, and ran the ball and dealt with Colt McCoy. Essentially looking at a 13-yard pass going, no, that's too much. Please run a comeback, sir, back to about 11 yards and I'll be happy. Actually, that's exactly what happened at one point during the game. It's just Colt McCoy thought about making a pass past 12 yards and just went, nope, not happy about that, and brought it back.
Have we heard from our illustrious friend since the Giants have gone on this run after all his pessimism?
Well, no, but surprisingly quiet. But his wife is a Seattle fan, so he might be dead.
Well, yes. And, she's probably reeling from the fact that they made Russell look like a game manager in this game. Proving my take correct.
No, you're going to get some heavy text for that.
I know. Come at me, Seahawk Twitter. Come at me. This Giants team. There's some things about Joe Judge, at the start of the year, when we kind of thought that this could go wrong. But there was something last week that actually made me think that I can kind of see why the players are maybe buying into him, because he's not like Matt Patricia. That was my initial reaction. I thought he's like a Matt Patricia clone. But did you see the press conference he had after Mississippi State lost to Ole Miss?
I did not.
So he had a bet with Evan Ingram, and he, obviously the story about Joe Judge, went to Mississippi State, was lined up for the Mississippi State job, but got the Giants job. Ole Miss beat Mississippi State. Joe Judge had a bet with Evan Ingram on it. So he showed up to a press conference dressed out in full Ole Miss swag, hat, jumper, everything. It's a little thing, but it's one of those things where you think, actually, that's a good way to win over the players.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way Matt Patricia would do that. He'd be too worried about what Matt Patricia would look like doing that. And obviously, it's that kind of self-involved thing that Matt Patricia had with the pencil and the image, and he was the mastermind of the defense that won the Super Bowl, even though it was 31st against the run. He was all about Matt Patricia, and obviously Joe Judge has very much been about a player's coach, and you get that from kind of guys that come from special teams backgrounds or positional coaches who miss the coordinating spots, such as Mike Tomlin or whatever. And I'm not comparing him to Mike Tomlin, long way to go. But what you sometimes get is when you miss that being responsible for a side of the ball, and the success of that side of the ball is how you're judged. When you don't have that, and all you have is the ability for the players to buy into your message, I think that can actually work to a head coach's benefit, especially if it's his first time being a head coach. So he's certainly seemingly managing to get a message through. They have gone on a run of games. That's fine. But does this Giants team, the minute that they won, and of course they're now first place in the NFC East, they're now saying, the Giants could cause a problem for somebody in December and January. Well, let's just look at the teams that are at the top of the NFC picture bracket. If they win, but they'll be the fourth seed.
Yep.
So that would mean that they would have potentially the Seahawks again, the Buccaneers, the Vikings, or the Cardinals. Who out of those teams will the Giants be favoured to win against?
No, right. Let's not look at it about who's favoured. Who could they knock off? I don't think.
Well, they would have a home. They would have a home game.
I think they could take the Buccaneers. Actually, no, because it'd be late in the season, cold weather. I could see the Giants picking off the Buccaneers.
Well, I mean, they only beat them by the 2-point conversion, but Seahawks would have to travel again back, potentially. Vikings would have to travel from their dome. Kirk Cousins isn't particularly great. Arizona, I don't think I would fancy them in cold weather New York.
No. I think the Vikings is the one team that could take the Giants, because they don't want Kirk Cousins to pass the ball. They just want to rely on their run game.
To clarify this one thing, this only is a worthwhile conversation talking point if the defense plays the way that it has the last 5 weeks.
Yeah.
If the defense doesn't show up, they're not in a game, because this kind of 17-12 scoreline, that to me is how the Giants will win games. Not any other way.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they were going crazy anyway when it was, when they had Daniel Jones at quarterback. It's not like this Colt McCoy at quarterback has only had a dramatic difference to the offense. I think their highest points scored this year has been 34 against the Cowboys.
Yeah, that's Cowboys.
Yeah, but they've been pretty run of the mill. Other than that, after that, their highest point scored was 27, which is very similar to what we were talking about with the Jets. They're not a team that will put points on you. They'll just control the clock and play good, sound defense. And look, they're on a 4-win streak, so who's to say how the rest of the season's going to finish? And they could positive momentum into the playoff. That's a thing.
No, sorry, I'm not disagreeing with you, and when I don't, disagree with you, I just keep my mouth shut.
Okay, let's look at this from the other side. Seattle. You and I were quite high on Seattle coming into this season. These kind of results are definitely making me waver.
Well, we were high on them up until about week 2 when they were playing the Cowboys, and they'd already shipped about 400 yards in the air, and it was quite clear that they were going to have difficulty being, a defense that we would recognize being a Seattle defense, and they have just never fixed it. Not 1 week have we really looked at the Seattle defense and thought, they've made progress, they've identified their problems, and they're going to do it. They didn't. They traded for a bit of pass rush, but again, they've been sending Bobby Wagner and Jamal Adams on the blitz, and that's not what Seattle defenses historically have done. They've not been a blitzing team. Yeah. So they're obviously thinking that that's their way to get out of things, and it's just not worked. And when you play down to the level of the Giants, 2 weeks ago we were saying Cardinals had lost, Rams had lost, Seahawks had managed to get 2 games in front, and now they've screwed it, and by losing to the Giants. So I'm still going to say that Seattle should not be losing to the Giants, but we are where we are, and they can only kind of learn from it and try and take it forward. But it's one of those games where, again, we said for the Raiders last week, if they lose a game like that, how can we possibly trust them to do anything in the playoffs? Pretty much is the exact same thing about Seattle.
I think what's worrying is, so if you look at the results or points scored coming off the bye, against Arizona they scored 34, San Francisco they scored 37, Buffalo Bills, which they lost the game 34-44, but they scored 34 points. Since then, since that Bills game, they've scored 16, 28, 23, and 12. Their offense is sputtering out after it started at such a prolific rate earlier on in the season. And I think that's also the concern. It's not only that they ship points, it's the fact that they're not moving the ball as well anymore. Yeah, moving on. New England at Los Angeles Chargers. This resulted in one of the weirdest stat lines ever. New England win 45 points to 0, as we say in Scotland, and Cam Newton threw for 85 yards. Just like when you look at that, when you go through that, you look at that box score, you're like 45 0.
It wasn't 85, it was 69.
Was it? I was sure it was 85.
Less. It was less.
Oh my goodness gracious me. 130. Oh yeah, because he put in Stidham as well at the end. Yes, you're correct. It was 69 yards. It was when I last checked, it was like 85. So I don't know how he's gone down to 69. Or maybe I misread that. Oh no, it was 87 passer rating. So yeah, 12 for 19 for 69 yards. Very nice, Cam. Very nice. 48 rush yards for 2 touchdowns. But
leading receiver for New England was Gunnar Olszewski with 1 catch for 38 yards.
I mean, of course he was. Did you see that boy? Bill Belichick's found a new Wes Welker, new Julian Edelman.
No, come on, he's not even in that level.
Oh, just you wait. grey white wide receiver. That's all Bill Belichick wants. Eagles at Packers. Packers win 30-16. I don't think there was any news coming out of this game.
Other than Jalen Hurts led in passing for the Eagles.
Yeah, there was that.
Yeah,
I think that it's going to be Hurts for the rest of the season. I just can't see. I don't know how you put Wentz back in, and then come the end of the season, it's who goes. Is it going to be Peterson, Wentz, or Roseman, or all three?
No, I don't think it'll be Roseman. I think it will. I'm so frazzled by this game because again, the Packers kept it a hell of a lot closer than they ever should have, which is what we've been saying about the Packers. In games where they should be dealing with teams relatively handily, they keep them around for too long. But the kind of new thing that's come out, and again, we always talk about the Philly media and how they always get a lot of leaks out there, and the story leading into this game was that the drafting of Hurts hurt Wentz's confidence. Well, again, immediately on the flip side, over the road, you've got Aaron Rodgers, who saw his successor potentially taken in the first round and went, right, fuck you all, and has basically had one of his best years in the last kind of 6 years, which everybody said it was going to happen. I was really annoyed because it was lazy, but it has happened, and he's now in the MVP race. So just if that's really what you're kind of now focusing on Wentz, that the drafting of another player while he's getting paid $30 million a year hurt his confidence, hurt his feelings, just get in the bin. Either take the cap might not be 175, it might be 195. So if you're really kind of talking about it, sort something out with Wentz. If he wants to get out of town and you need to be able to get some leverage, do something. But you can't allow this narrative to persist all the way through to the end of the season.
Yeah, well, he said that Hurts is definitely starting this week, but he won't commit to him for the rest of the season. So it's kind of, I mean, look, if my quarterback, who I've given 100 and whatever odd million to, is that mentally fragile, that me drafting a number two, when I have to draft a number two because physically he's fragile, I get off of him. That's a warning sign.
We've called him the summer camp counselor, and I think if anything close to that is true about his confidence being hurt, then yeah, I don't want him leading my team.
Yeah, Broncos, the Chiefs. Broncos lose 16-22. Us being the Nostradamuses that we are, we told you, do not take the Chiefs when they're a high line, because they will. They are just in cruise control just now, and they'll just let teams stick around. They could have won by more, but Andy Reid went back to his old ways and just was like, I don't need to challenge. I've got Patrick Mahomes. I'll get another touchdown somewhere. Washington football team 23, Pittsburgh Steelers 17. This was the battle between the two candidates for comeback player of the year, and Alex Smith won.
Yeah, well, we jinxed the Steelers because we were talking about the AFC playoff picture, and what we really wanted was an undefeated Steelers team against Kansas City, and for the the storylines to be all there and for it to be really hyped up. And immediately next week they lose against the fucking 4-7 Washington football team that have done nothing all year. This is just I don't really know how to describe this game, but how you expect yourself to really kind of challenge Kansas City or any other of the kind of division winners after playing like this. This game really, really rocked my confidence in anything that Pittsburgh can do going forward.
Well, see, even the way they played against Baltimore as well had me a little bit. I thought they did not look good against Baltimore, and I don't know if they took Baltimore lightly because of all the everyone missing, and then the offense has just looked sluggish the last couple of weeks, and I thought the defense played well against Washington. It's continued to be the standout side of the Steelers team this year, but it would. I put a lot of this on the offense. The offense was just not going at all, and I don't know why. I don't know what it is that has disrupted it the last couple of weeks.
I mean, you could go back to looking at the kind of game against the Eagles, they allowed 29 points. Games against the Titans, they allowed 24, only won by 3. Game against the Ravens, only won by 4. Game against the Cowboys next week, only won by 5. And then against the Ravens the week before before this game, they only won by 5. They've been in a lot of tight games, but they've just managed to eke it out. So we always praise teams that win kind of one-score games, and that's exactly what the Steelers have been doing against relatively okay teams. But to then completely fall flat on your face after being up, it's not as though this was a kind of they were down early and they had to try and fight back and game plan out the window. I mean, they were up. In the third quarter, they're a solid football team, good defense. Super Bowl winning quarterback, even though he's coming off a small injury, he's been playing well. Big Breeze is what they've been calling him. Managing the game, still, throwing dimes when required. The whole offense is still available to Pittsburgh compared to New Orleans, but they just, you say that you don't want, you're a bit surprised that there was no ruthlessness by Cleveland. Well, there's just been no ruthlessness at all from Pittsburgh all year. I think apart from maybe the first half against Cleveland back when they won 38-7. That was about the only time we saw any sort of ruthlessness from Pittsburgh all year. So yeah, I think this is not just a kind of banana skin game. I don't think it's a whoopsie game. I think it's finally a realization of something that could have happened multiple times over the season.
I am giving the Steelers offense a bit of a hard time here. You do have to give a lot of credit to the Washington defense. Especially Chase Young. His stand on the goal line, that tackle where he came off the edge, just completely whipped the running back round with that tackle. That's why you draft him so high. He was. I thought he played really well, and that whole defense played. That whole defensive line. It's young, and it's going to be a problem for quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, I think let's say we give Washington a bit of credit because I pretty much said that this was all Pittsburgh's fault. I mean, Washington went out there and played their game, and they did enough to get field goals and they did enough to get the touchdowns, and. I mean, the main player for Washington here would, you say might be Alex Smith, but I mean, really, it was Logan Thomas, a converted tight end, who's bounced around a couple of teams and been with Washington, I think, the last 2. And, I mean, they just either decided he wasn't a threat and weren't willing to mark him, but, he was such a mismatch in the middle of the field that he was able to kind of consistently move the chains for them, and then they were able to get points. And so this is the type of game that if you're a Washington fan, you can say Rivera's got us on the right track. Okay, we've got this young defense. They're buying in. We've got and what I'll say is you've got some skilled players on the offensive side of the ball that give you hope. Obviously, Terry McLaurin.
Yeah.
You would expect him to get an extension, at the end of this year. Sims is, had a good game, but I don't think he's been really consistent all year. Antonio Gibson, who's now going to be out, but again, looks as though he's got a little bit of explosive ability. But after that, you're still pretty kind of, thin on the offensive side of the ball. So, winning with Alex Smith is nice and all, but I mean, you want to try and now focus on the offensive side of the ball. If they do anything in free agency or the draft which isn't really focused on the offensive side of the ball, then it'll be a big mistake, I think.
I did actually have one other Pittsburgh question for you with your coaching hat on. Trips nasty formation. For those that don't know, it's when you're in the trips alignment, but you're closer. Your trips wide receivers are closer to the offensive line.
I take it you're not talking about a bunch, you're talking about...
Yeah, so it was a bunch. I call it trips nasty, but it's trips bunch close to the offensive tackle. Pittsburgh ran that a lot. I don't like that because I think that just, you're not spreading out the defense, you're condensing the defense down to that one side. Why would you run that as an offensive coordinator?
Numbers, point of attack, and also whenever you release from a bunch, if the defense isn't good at picking up their kind of numbers, so ordinarily defenses might number receivers from the sideline towards the middle of the field, 1, 2, 3, and depending on what their coverages are, their rules, if you then release from a bunch in an unusual way, it can cause problems for the defense. So that's a very kind of 20-second answer for why you would go bunch. You can also then motion across from that bunch. You can then use orbit motion. I mean, you can do a lot of things from the bunch. Whether you do that or not is up to you, but there's benefit to doing it. And if you're wanting to get to the edge quickly, you can use that bunch as an extra numbers to crack down and pull around on it. So that's essentially why you would do that. I appreciate condensing the field, but the Rams condense the field all the time into these kind of formations. It just doesn't look like it. But that's their whole backbone. I mean, that's their whole part of their offensive identity. It's not really the offensive identity of the Steelers to condense it all. But when you bring all the bodies inside, it opens up a lot of space outside as well. So there's about 3-4 different things that we could potentially talk about it. But for me, for what the Steelers were doing, from what I remember them doing, it was more about the way that the receivers were releasing and trying to confuse Washington's coverage.
Yeah, and then they were then attacking the single receiver side. They just weren't able to hook up on some of them. I just think if you're using that, then I agree. But it can really help in the run game, but they weren't really using it to help in the run game.
Well, what you do more often than not is, obviously it's a passing league now, is that essentially what you do is that what a lot of the NFL teams do, and you can watch this for a number of teams, is that they'll take the outside receivers and they'll use them as a clear out, and the third man closer to the tackle will kind of loop underneath those clear outs, and he'll have an option to either go inside or outside depending on how they play the coverage. And it's essentially just a wee kind of dump off option play that they'll often have on those kind of bunches.
Okay, let's move on to the remaining games, and then we'll pick the Week 14 matchups. Bills beat San Francisco 34-24. I think Josh Allen looked really good in this game. I don't know if you agree with that one, Dan.
I've got nothing negative about what he did.
No, I thought he played well. He had a couple of nice throws, but I think that's the end of the San Francisco season. They had kind of a shot to get back into the playoffs, but I think that's just putting the nail in the coffin there. Shorter
odds on Josh Allen being MVP than Russell Wilson right now.
No, makes sense. There's some interesting ones that we can talk about offline. Cowboys took on the Ravens. Ravens win 34-17. Lamar, great touchdown run. They basically just went back to the old school Ravens way of just using the run to pound the Cowboys into submission there.
When you've had as bad a run as Baltimore's had in the 3 previous weeks, this was the exact type of team you wanted to be able to play. They didn't match up well against what you wanted to do offensively, and everything just came together and worked really well. So yeah, I mean, Dallas, Mike Nolan, is if Greg Williams gets fired before Mike Nolan, then it's questionable. I mean, I think that the Cowboys brass are really kind of fed up with Mike Nolan and what's happening on the defensive side of the ball, because they're saying that we weren't this soft against the run last year. I said, well, no shit, you weren't. No, I don't think anybody's been this soft against the run in the last 25 years in the NFL. Yeah. So that's again a change that could have been made earlier in the year if they really wanted to change it, but they haven't done it, and they are where they are. So the Cowboys are going to have a nice high draft pick.
So let's, as we said, this is a bonus episode, or we're just condensing this all into one. Let's put our picking hats on, Dan, and let's go through our Week 14. New England at the Rams. Rams are favoured by 6 points. Who are you going with?
The Rams, as I say, against last week against the Cardinals, it said it didn't matter who I picked, I would be wrong. And as usual, you picked the Rams and I was wrong. So I don't really count that as a pick. But the 45-0 to, as we say in Scotland, to New England against the Chargers is just a complete mirage. And I think they will have a severe difficulty against the Rams. So if it's the Rams by 6, I'll take that.
I'm going to take the Patriots in this one. Thursday night football, things get weird, and New England stayed on the West Coast. So Belichick's got his full prepared mode on. And it's a Super Bowl matchup as well. So yeah, go for New England. Arizona at the New York Giants. We talked about this as a potential playoff matchup. Arizona are favoured by 2.5 points here.
Every time I've picked Arizona, I've been wrong. I have no love for the Giants, but I'll take the Giants just because I don't trust Arizona whatsoever.
I'm riding the Giants' coattails, and I think this New York defense is going to cause them some Arizona and Kyler Murray some problems. They like to keep them in the pocket, and Kyler has not done a great job this year when he's been hemmed in. Dallas at Cincinnati. Dallas are favoured by 3.5 points.
If Brandon Allen is out, then I will go with the Cowboys. If Brandon Allen's in, I will take Cincinnati.
I'm going to take Dallas on this one, regardless. Denver at Carolina. I will say that these games have all been stinking to pick so far. Denver at Carolina. Carolina 3-point favourites.
I'm totally. I am no longer willing to represent Drew Lock in any sort of forum, but I do trust the Denver defense. It's a very, very difficult one to try and reconcile. But Carolina, they just had their bye, didn't they? They didn't play last week.
Yeah, they had a bye.
And
no Christian McCaffrey this week.
Yeah. Well, considering I picked the fucker, first overall in my fantasy draft, and I've not had him at all for the whole of the season, I'm not surprised. But the surprising amount of times that teams have come off their bye and not really been able to do anything is quite surprising. So if it's 3 points, I mean that's essentially what a Carolina football game's been all year. So I'll just edge for Carolina as long as Joey Sly kind of gets to fuck.
Yeah. It's just difficult. Like Carolina being favourites is what throws me here. And as bad as Drew Lock is, I'm going to believe in Vic Fangio, so I'll take Denver. Green Bay at Detroit. Green Bay are favoured by 7.5 points here. I'm going to go for Green Bay on this one. I think they cover here.
Yeah, this is so strange, but in division, kind of a bit of a wee kind of bump back. They're not going to play the same defense they did against Green Bay earlier in the year. 7 points again. Packers have bad habits of hanging around relatively bad teams. So you know what? I'm going to take the Lions plus 7.5.
Okay. Houston at Chicago. Houston are favoured by 2 points. Did you know that Chicago passed up the chance to draft Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes?
Only seen about kind of 20 of those tweets and articles already, and everyone trying to get all a different angle of they went to his private workout, or they visited with his high school coach. Yeah, you didn't pick him. Just stop it. All right.
Yeah.
So it's in Chicago, which makes me slightly weary, but I hate everything about Chicago right now. I think they should have a complete trifecta removal of Pace, Nagy, and whatever quarterback they decide to put in. So I'm going to go with Deshaun Watson and hope that he's able to pull something out.
Yeah, I'm taking Houston. I think this is a Deshaun revenge game for how dare you not pick me. And then he'll look over at Trubisky and just go, God damn you. Kansas City at Miami. Kansas City favoured by 7.5 points here.
As we've talked about before, there's been multiple times where the KC have won by 14 points and they decide not to do it last week. 7 points is probably just enough for me to be able to say Kansas City.
Okay, so do you want KC at 7?
Yeah, KC at 7.
Okay. I'll take Miami at 7.5. I think the 7.5 is enough to just make me pick Miami. Yeah, is anything under a touchdown, take Kansas City. Anything over a touchdown? No, just
Well,
now. Because they're just cruising. They're just cruising.
I'm winning it bang on a touchdown. I know. I just think Steve Spagnuolo is going to bamboozle Tua. So we'll see.
Possibly, yeah, we'll see. Minnesota at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay are favoured by 6.5 points.
Tampa Bay coming off the bye. Minnesota traveling. Again, it's very, very difficult. We'll see whether or not they've managed to fix some of the potential scheme problems that they've had in Tampa over this past week. But what's the line again?
6.5 points.
It's really high for me, but I'm willing to say that defense will be able to hold the Vikings run game in check, and I'll just take Tampa.
Yeah, I agree. I'm taking Tampa on that one. Tennessee at Jacksonville. Tennessee favoured by 7.5 points. Coming off that loss, I would say that's too high, but I like Mike Vrabel. I think he coaches his team hard, and this is the perfect bounce back game that we've talked about before. So I'm going to take Tennessee, even though Jacksonville have played teams close the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, so you don't trust Mike Glennon to be the future of Jacksonville?
No, I'm still bitter that I bought a Gardner Minshew jersey and pretty much instantly he got benched.
Well, the Buck and Jinx is alive and well.
Yeah.
Yeah, just run game too much, and I think 7 points. I'm not taking the 0.5. I'm being a coward, and this is one where I'm fully admitting that I am a coward. I don't trust the 0.5, so I'm going to take the Titans -7.
Indianapolis at Las Vegas. Indianapolis favoured by 2.5 points.
Really, really difficult for me because these are two of my favourite teams of the preseason, and they've kind of meandered their way to where we kind of thought they might be. Raiders maybe a little bit less so, but Colts I was higher on. I think they're the more solid team. I think they're a more solid defense, so I'm quite happy to take Colts -2.5.
Philip Rivers in Las Vegas, away from his kids. He's going to get a good night's sleep. So he'll be fully charged to take on this Las Vegas defense. I think I'd go with the Colts here as well.
Philip Rivers being away from his kids, so he wins that. That's a new one. I don't think I've heard you say that.
Yeah, he's well. Speaking as a father, look, when you can get that full night's uninterrupted sleep, you're at your best, and you take it. You revel in it. You don't stay up late. You don't go out drinking. You're like, you know what, guys? I'm going to bed at 8 o'clock, and I will see you in the morning after a good 12 hours. New York Jets at Seattle. Seattle are favoured by 13.5 points here. I'm taking the Jets.
Yeah, I'm taking the Jets too.
Yes, look, Seattle, we have said time and time again, curb stomp someone, and you have not done it. So you do not deserve a line that high. You've done nothing to deserve it. Atlanta at the Chargers. Atlanta are favoured by 2.5 points here.
Yeah, I mean, really, really difficult. Two teams which kind of are similar in some ways, but one got rid of their head coach and one hasn't. Atlanta were the team that couldn't hold on to a lead for forever, and the Chargers had that similarly in the early part of the season. How does that translate to this game? Well, not much, but Atlanta are probably more on the up than the Chargers are. I think there might be a severe morale problem with the Chargers, given the way that they just couldn't do anything against the Patriots, and given that the answers that Lynn gives to these difficult questions are really kind of unsatisfactory. You know what? I'm going to go with Raheem. If I don't have any, I said last week I trusted Herbert over Lynn's coaching, and you know what? I'm going to trust Raheem Morris over Anthony Lynn again. So I'm going to go with the Falcons.
Yeah, I'm going ATL this week as well. New Orleans at Philadelphia. It's Taysom versus Hurts. New Orleans are favoured by 7 points. I don't like Philly to win, but I like Hurts to keep this competitive. So I'm going to go with Philly.
I think Dennis Allen will just kind of play with them. I think this is a New Orleans defense which is severely underrated, and I think a rookie quarterback with Hurts' skill set it's not something that the New Orleans haven't seen before. I mean, they're playing against essentially kind of the exact same player every week in practice right now. So I'm going to take New Orleans with a 7.
Can't believe you just compared Taysom Hill to Jalen Hurts. Taysom Hill is a punt returner.
And
That's playing quarterback.
Well, I'm sorry. At the moment, it's not as though kind of Hurts has really going to really done anything to make me think that he's going to absolutely shred apart a very good New Orleans defense.
Okay. Washington at 49ers. 49ers favourite by 3 points here.
Is it so low?
I think it's, I don't know. Is it a short week?
I don't know, but if I'm getting San Francisco 3 points against an NFC East team, I'm taking San Francisco.
I'm going to go out on a limb, pardon the pun, and take Washington and Alex Smith. They're playing well. I like that defense. That defensive line, Nick Mullins isn't going to do much against them. I'm going to take Washington here. Pittsburgh at Buffalo. Buffalo favoured by 1.5 points.
I like that. I'm going to jump on Buffalo. I like the way that Josh Allen played. As I say, I had nothing negative to say against it. He's moved ahead in the MVP. Odds of Russell Wilson. They played very, very well. Pittsburgh will be hurt. Are they a wounded animal or are they not? I don't know, but I just think that Buffalo have that little something that Pittsburgh doesn't. I mean, they're both sound teams. I think they both got their pluses and their minuses, but I think they're both at that upper level of the NFL teams just now. But I like Buffalo's offensive coaching staff a little bit better, and I like what they've got on offer more than Pittsburgh just now.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Buffalo, and what's made me take Buffalo is just how poor Pittsburgh's offense has been the last 2 weeks. And again, shorter week. So, I'd just take Buffalo in this one. Baltimore at Cleveland. Baltimore are favoured by 1 point here. I am taking Cleveland in this.
You know what? I think I've got to take Cleveland as well. The Cowboys game has done nothing really than just to improve their win-loss record. I didn't really see anything that would make me think that the Cleveland team that played against Tennessee, which Baltimore lost against, and I know it's been a couple of weeks in between, I still don't think that Baltimore's issues have been fixed by that win against the Cowboys. So I'm going to take Cleveland this one too. Betting against my own team, how dare I?
It's okay. Join me on the dark side. I've been doing it all season. That wraps up our bumper show for you. We will be back next week to recap Week 14 and to do our Week 15 picks. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, and the Facebook.com. And we will see you next week. Goodbye.